Well, the president back in Jersey, Jersey Shore back on the air. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto, and here's the deal. Well, I'm not really surprised. A lot of Wall Streeters didn't show up. In fact, barely any. With me now is Jonathan Hoenig and Lizzie McDonald, and eventually, here's Mike Norman. He makes a grand entrance.
Careful.
Mike Norman sitting down. Here we go.
Careful now.
A guy who has no idea what a sub sandwich is, by the way.
What are you talking about?
Oh, come on. Please. If the menu doesn't have a tassel on it, you don't touch it. All right, well, Mike, what do you make of this? Are you surprised?
What? About him
Did
going
you hear
there?
what the segment's about? No, Wall Street just not at any of these big paths.
Well, look, I could talk a little bit from experience here. I mean, my firm, John Thomas Financial, we actually hosted Michael Steele, Republican National Committee Chairman, who came in. But having said that...
Is it a Republican firm? Because they better be aware of the devil in their shop.
It's a Republican firm. But having said that, let me just say that, you know, Wall Street, the financial industry, most of it, the industry is concentrated in major metropolitan centers, New York, Chicago, New Jersey, that tend to be more liberal. I mean, so, you know, where the Democratic Party might lose some of that backing, I don't think it's going to lose a lot, because the people who work in Wall Street tend to be, at least socially, you know, more on the liberal side of the equation. I think they're still going to be big donors to the Democratic Party.
Jonathan?
Well, so far they haven't showed up. And in fact, Goldman Sachs, which of course has been right in the president's target for the better part of the last year, gave $1 million plus in 2008. They've given roughly 100,000. So we're not necessarily seeing even liberal Wall Street show up. And honestly, Neil, why would they? The president has explicitly made Wall Street the enemy. I mean, he has blamed for over a year now greedy, evil, nefarious Wall Street bankers for collapsing the economy. So they'd be crazy to support a president, in my opinion, that so explicitly names them to be criminals. All
right, well, you wouldn't be, he's taken it to new levels. You're right, Jonathan. But Lizzie, he would not be the first president to entertain taking money from even his enemies. I mean, what's that they say, keep your friends closer, your enemies closer, at least their money.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's always been a turnstile between Wall Street and Washington when it comes to fundraising. I mean, we know that. And the meter has always been running up on Wall Street for donations to Washington for some time. But I think we've already reported, Fox Business has already reported, that some Wall Street firms are really pulling back, including Goldman Sachs, as Jonathan pointed out. And the real key here is...
But the president has put them in that vice, right? Because if they give contributions from institutions that were themselves rescued, even if they've given the money back, it looks weird.
Yeah, and now could the president say, look, you know, I'm not getting Wall Street donations because I'm tough on Wall Street. I've enacted financial reform. Could he flip it around? That's something you could watch.
Here's the thing. I think financial reform is going to lead to some shrinkage in the financial industry, in that sector of the economy, and it's almost strategically not a bad thing for the Democrats that this is happening, because they could reach out to other sectors of the economy that are much more engaged on Main Street in the real economy. It's going to shrink as a result of financial reform.
Well, it's not going to shrink when it comes to women and minorities, because, of course, the reform has a whole office of women and minorities. I guess that's a different subject. But, Neil, how can you blame Wall Street for not wanting to support a man that names not criminals, but names the entire industry to be criminals? He has tarred and feathered Wall Street as an entire franchise, as an entire industry, that I think that not even the oil companies have been subject to that kind of a terrible demonization, in my view.
Boy, and he says such nice things about you, Jonathan. I don't understand. Look, Jonathan, I know you're busy preparing that Chicago fundraiser for the big guy, so I'm going to let you go.
You're right.
The Arizona senator is not all too pleased with an Arizona judge. Mighty Mac on the attack, and John McCain attacking here, and only here, on the Arizona illegal crackdown that a judge's decision has hanging on the flimsiest of vines.
Hello, everybody. We're going to order a sub right now, and I've got Carl.
City South.
This little thing called the Constitution. To your critics tell it. Turns out that the new financial regulation law exempts the stock watchers from letting us watch them. They don't have to disclose anything to anyone anytime. Now, it's true that under a completely overlooked provision in the overhaul, the SEC no longer has to comply with outright requests for information, not all requests. Specifically, the SEC need not disclose records derived from, and I quote, surveillance risk assessments or other regulatory and oversight activities, and there is an addendum here, or any questions posed by Fox Business. So, Jonathan Hoenig, what do you make of this?
Well, Neil, I have to wonder whether this provision was put in perhaps specifically in response to Fox Business, because for the better part of the year, this network has been making these Freedom of Information inquiries into the Madoff affair and AIG and Stanford, finding out some very telling data. And unfortunately, it's not into a bureaucracy that wants to be transparent. It's into a bureaucracy that failed with Madoff, failed with others. So it's too bad that, unfortunately, the president and all the spirits of transparency seems to be going just in the opposite direction.
But Lizzie, you say that's not what's going on.
No, it's not what's going on. The SEC is not prevented from complying with FOIA requests for information on cases like Madoff. The SEC still has a FOIA office up and running and will comply with FOIA requests. What they're talking about here is specifically what has always been in the Freedom of Information Act law, and that is information that comes out of an examination of a company that's done by an agency. That has always been exempt. Right. And so what they're saying, the FinReg is saying, is that when the SEC goes down to audit Wall Street books, Wall Street is essentially giving them proprietary trading information like leverage, trading strategies, and trading books. The SEC cannot disclose that information because it's proprietary information that a Morgan Stanley or a rival firm could use to basically better themselves and improve their profits at the expense of a rival firm. So they're basically protecting proprietary information.
That was already exempt.
That was already for decades, for a very long time. It is right.
But let's say you signed on to a financial reform measure where everything was going to be transparent. And wouldn't you go the extra mile to be more transparent and to say maybe some of the to say some of the things that were maybe allowed in the past and accepted in the past are not going to be allowed now?
No, that's not what the law says. SEC still has to make FOIA disclosures. They still have to abide by FOIA requests.
But they're the ones deciding what is. No, Lizzie, they're the ones deciding what is.
No, the FOIA law, not the SEC and not FinReg. It's already been in the FOIA law that the SEC was not allowed to disclose proprietary trading information at a Wall Street firm, period, or any other examination.
You don't see any case where someone there could use this. See, that's what you're doing, and that's why we're not complying.
No, I don't see. I say this is perfectly fine, and it's within the letter of the law.
Well, I say you're missing evil underneath your nose.
No, I'm not.
All right, go ahead, Michael.
I agree with everything she just said.
Oh, that's a shock.
No, but
so you don't see any harm or worry here?
No, because absolutely, this. I think it has to be this way. Otherwise, what prevents a firm from filing a FOIA request to get information on a competitor? I mean, that is information that is privileged.
But this is about news organizations that might require information on an individual under suspicion.
But they could get information.
They can get that. There's nothing that stops the SEC from getting that information.
The Freedom of Information Act request.
You guys realize the history on this sort of thing, that how you can cling to something to avoid investigation?
Listen, I file a lot of FOIA requests with the SEC and the IRS, and notably the SEC over corporate accounting scandals. But the SEC has always redacted information for decades about a Bernie Madoff. And by the way, if they have an ongoing investigation, that information leaks out, a Bernie Madoff could take all that money and offshore it, and that would still hurt a lot of
What do you think of that?
But that's just the whole point. I mean, the SEC had an investigation into Bernie Madoff. They were sitting on Bernie Madoff. They were sitting on some of these examples where even the fact that they went ahead and did the investigation. I mean, I have in the mind, Neil, that unfortunately the SEC is being rewarded with a bigger budget and more control, even though they totally fell down on the job in the most unbelievably obvious way in recent years. I mean, we're essentially
they were given
rewarding
information they didn't act on. We're talking about disclosing information to me or Mike Norman or you. Would you catch Bernie Madoff if you had that FOIA information? Would Mike, me? I don't think so.
All I know, guys, and you're arguing a lot of the details here. I'm arguing in the broadest sense, and Mike, maybe you address a point I raised with Lizzie. You could say that we are simply doing what we've had the power to do in the past and not allow this type of activity. Now, you could also use it to shield yourself from any kind of request, or at least make it harder and longer for news organizations, not competitors, news organizations, to get to the bottom of what the heck
I don't think that's the information that's protected or exempt under
I'm talking
the
about
law.
intent.
No, okay, I hear the SEC, to that, your question, to your point, and the SEC has called me, and I'm working with them on this story. They say that is not the case, Neil, that they would continue to comply.
Well,
and they're not going to